What is up, Bradford Bass family? Welcome back to Bass Babble. And today, guys, we're going to talk about what I like to call fishing the oddball pattern. We as bass fishermen, a lot of times when we're out there on the water, we're trying to establish or find a pattern that the bass may be on that particular day. And once we establish that pattern, this will allow us to eliminate a lot of dead water, which ultimately will make our days more productive. And I think there's a lot of things that go into a pattern. It could be a particular piece of cover or structure that the bass is relegating towards that day. But I also think lure color can be a pattern. Some colors are getting bit more that day than other colors. I think it can be cadence, the way you retrieve a lure, whether it be a jerkbait, how many times you twitch it and how long you pause it, or if you're flipping a jig, or you happen to dead stick it, or are you picking up on it once or twice and the bass are striking. All those little minute things are very important, and that is how you establish a pattern when you're out there on the water. One good example of this is a few years ago, my buddy Josh and I were fishing at Lake St. Clair, and we were fishing some main lake docks, and we were catching fish periodically here and there going down the stretch. But ultimately what I ended up noticing as we were fishing these docks was we were getting all our bites on the right side of every dock. For whatever reason, I don't really know why, but the one side of every single dock, that was the side that we were getting bites on.
On the right side of these docks.
Once we started to figure that out, once we went fishing, as we were going down the shoreline, we were able to pretty much eliminate one side of the dock and just focus our attention on the right side of the dock, which ultimately ended up allowing us to catch a lot more fish that day. But there is one particular pattern, and that's what we're going to talk about, and this is what I call the oddball pattern. And the oddball pattern is a pattern that I believe that will work 95% of the time, every time you go out there. A lot of these other patterns I just spoke about may work one day, but the next day the bass might be on something completely different. But I believe the oddball pattern is always a pattern that you could go to catch a fish when you really need one. I'm not going to say it's the most productive pattern, but I do believe it's something that is a kind of like a general rule of thumb that will always work. And the reason I call it the oddball pattern is because, and we're going to talk, and for the example of this video today, we're going to pretend that we're fishing down a stretch of shoreline. I'm a shallow water guy. That's the way I like to fish. That's what a lot of people have access to, is shallow water fishing. So you're a pond fisherman or a creek fisherman, or you're just a bank beater, or if you're out in a boat, whatever. Everybody, for the most part, has access to some kind of shoreline somewhere. But the oddball pattern is finding that one difference in a particular stretch of shoreline. How many times have you been fishing and you find a magic tree, or you find a particular spot on a shoreline or a little area on a shoreline that you feel like is money? You always catch fish there. If you really pay attention to those areas, more often than not, the reason that you catch fish there every time is because there's something different about that particular area opposed to the rest of the shoreline. Okay, so when I'm going down the shoreline, that is what I am looking for. I am looking for, and it doesn't matter if I'm flipping a jig, throwing a crankbait, spinnerbait, whatever it is, I am looking for the difference in the shoreline. For example, if I am fishing a shoreline that has a whole bunch of laydowns on it, I am looking for something that might just stand out a little bit different. It could be a couple rocks on the shoreline mixed in with all the wood. It could be a dock, one isolated or two isolated docks throughout a stretch of shoreline. Those are the areas that you really want to focus on, because more often than not, there's going to be a bass there. A couple good examples. Last year, I was fishing with my buddy Brandon up at West Harbor, and we were going back in this pocket, and it was all metal seawalls, and we were kind of fishing down the seawalls a little bit. We're having no luck. And I was actually getting ready to turn it around, and we were getting ready to leave. And I looked at the very back of the pocket, and I saw a few laydowns, like 2 or 3 laydowns in the back corner, and like a little boat ramp, like a little tiny little, almost like kayak boat ramp. I said, let's go down there and fish that first before we pull up out of here, because the rest of this whole pocket was this metal seawalls. We went down there. I skipped up my jig, and Brandon on one side of the little boat ramp, and there was a lay down, and Brandon fished the other side of the little boat ramp, which was a lay down, and we both caught fish right there. Okay? That was something different in that particular shoreline. That was the oddball of that particular shoreline, and that paid off. Also, that same day, we were going down a shoreline that was primarily all wood laydowns, and it looked real juicy. But we weren't catching many fish at all going up it. But I saw coming up was a few boulder-type rocks mixed in with the wood. And I knew in my mind that that area had potential to hold a fish. Once we got up to that area, I flipped up there and I was able to catch a fish. So those little things are very, very important. Finding the oddball in the shoreline. Because, guys, I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. I'll go to a shoreline, and this thing will have lay down trees everywhere, grass everywhere, everything. It looks so juicy. But a lot of it doesn't ever play out. A lot of it doesn't hold fish. It's only certain little areas of that shoreline that tend to be better. And if you really pay attention to why those areas are better, it'll start to clue you in on what I'm talking about. There's something different about that opposed to the rest of the shoreline, if that makes sense. Another example I have that is not really so much a shoreline, but a lake I like to fish a lot here in Ohio has a large grass flat that stretches probably, I don't know, 800-900 yards down one side of the lake. And I have fished this grass mat a lot, and I've caught fish throughout it. But there's one particular part of the grass mat that I always catch a lot of fish. And the reason I catch a lot of fish there is because there's rock on the bottom mixed in with the grass right there. Rock and grass are mixed together. That particular area is the only area like that along that stretch of shoreline. That's why I always have better luck there. That is the oddball of that grass bed, essentially. Another example, this past fall, I was fishing and I was struggling. I was out fishing. It was cold. I was struggling. I think I caught one little tiny bass up to this point, and I was about ready to go home. It was raining. And I said, I am going to go down this main lake shoreline a little bit with a spinnerbait. And pretty much this entire main lake shoreline is just kind of like nothing. I mean, it's kind of just, I don't know, I wouldn't say sand. It's just clay banks, or I don't know, not even clay. It's nothing. There's not a lot to it. Sand mixed with a little bit of gravel. That's what it is. But every so often, there would be like a bush laying in the water. And that's what I targeted. And I ended up catching, I think, 3 bass, all close to 3 pounds, one being over 3 pounds, by targeting those particular bushes. So basically, I just eliminated the rest of the shoreline because I knew exactly where I wanted to go amongst that, because I knew more often than not there was going to be a bass on those bushes. And that's what happened ultimately. So finding the oddball pattern is very important. And like I said, guys, it can be so many different things in a shoreline. It could be, for example, if you're fishing a lily pad field, okay, lily pads everywhere, and you're flipping pads. Every now and then you'll see a stump mixed in with those pads. You should really focus on that stump, because that is the oddball thing amongst that lily pad field. Those, if you can learn to identify those oddball things on a particular shoreline or lily pad field or grass bed, whatever it may be, if you can learn to identify those things, you could always fall back on that. I'm not saying that's the most productive way to always go out there and catch bass, but I do believe you can run that pattern whenever you really need to catch a fish. Like if you're really struggling and need to catch a fish, you could always run that pattern. You could jump around different shorelines and just look for that one little oddball thing different with that shoreline and go to it, and eventually you will catch a bass off one of those things. So it's just something I was thinking about. It's something that I have really started to focus on more the past couple seasons, and I really wanted to share with you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. The next video, the next Bass Babble I'm going to talk about something I like to do fishing-wise that not many anglers do anymore, and it's actually brought me a lot of success the past 3 years. It's kind of like my own little secret. I feel like it's not really a secret, but it's something not many people at all do. And I've kind of haven't told anybody really about it, but I'm going to talk about it on the next one. So if you guys enjoyed this, hit that like button, subscribe. I appreciate you watching. Everybody stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.